Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the debut episode of the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Krewe Media. I am David Grubb, and I've been in sports media for nearly 2 decades, with the last 10 years primarily covering the New Orleans Pelicans. I hope that the Post Up becomes your daily stop to stay up to date with the latest news and analysis regarding your Pels. Since joining Boot Krewe Media the last couple of days, I just wanted to explain to folks how I got here and what we're going to do. This feels in some ways like it's an overdue partnership. I have known the guys at Boot Krewe for a while, just as colleagues, seeing them around. I have relationships with some of them just from the last few years and being on Pelicans media and interacting with them on my shows that I've had in the past, whether it's been on the radio with Hard in the Paint or on my podcast. And, we've just gotten along. We did things differently because I've been a journalist for 25 plus years now. And, this is more of a fan-centered organization where folks came in and wanted to speak directly to fans and address the concerns that fans have every day about their teams. And I think Boot Krewe has done a fantastic job of that, growing so quickly over the last couple of years into the foremost site for fan interaction about these New Orleans area teams. And it came together really quickly. I got to thank Justin for reaching out to me and asking me to join the team. I didn't expect the call. It just kind of came out organically, and I'm really excited about the potential that we have to create something really unique and to enhance each other. I think I bring to the table, my journalistic chops and my insights and my ability to be there every day with the New Orleans Pelicans, whether it's practice, whether it's game day. I'll be there and be your foot soldier on the ground to let you know what's going on with the team, and then get the questions that you, the fans, are most interested in, and be able to answer them at least ask those questions and let the answers speak for themselves. So I'm really excited about the potential that we have here at Boot Krewe and with the Post Up. And I think we're going to do some great things in the future. The role is going to be more than just this daily podcast, but it starts with this. And I think we're going to grow quickly, and I think we're going to be really exceptional. Now, certainly I'm making moves. Boot Krewe is making moves. But the thing that you're most worried about are what moves are the New Orleans Pelicans going to make this offseason. And I think one of the big, certainly the biggest move that everybody's focused on right now is the possibility of Zion Williamson being traded for Giannis Antetokounmpo. And, Scoop B Robinson, a guy that I know very well, published a report last week on the internet about the Pelicans, A, still having concerns about their relationship with Zion Williamson, and B, monitoring the situation in Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo and his potential exit there, because there are just some really bad financial numbers and just roster situations for the Bucks. When you look at that Bucks team, another disappointing year where they lose in the first round of the playoffs, a lot of injuries. Dame Lillard likely gone for all of next season with an Achilles injury that he suffered in the playoffs. You've got expiring contracts when you talk about Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis Jr. And you have a team that, the second best player on that team nominally is Kyle Kuzma behind Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Bucks are also in financial disarray because of the money that they owe Giannis and the money that they owe Dame, and those contracts being long-term. Giannis has about 3 years left on his deal. This is a time potentially for him to move on and not get caught in that Kevin Garnett situation of hanging on too long with the franchise out of loyalty. He's done everything he can in Milwaukee, certainly. The Pelicans' interest comes from the fact that they operate with the control of the Bucks' 2 picks in first round picks in 2026 and 2027. Having those picks and the Bucks lacking control of their first round picks for most of the next half decade makes the Pelicans either a potential trade partner to bring Giannis to New Orleans or a potential trade partner to move Giannis somewhere else. Now, the likelihood, in my opinion, of Giannis coming to New Orleans is still low, because you'd have to get Giannis to buy into that and decide that this is the place that he wants to come to. But I think that certainly there's an interest from the Pelicans, as there should be. You're talking about one of the 5 best players in the league, someone who's been an MVP candidate basically since his 3rd year in the league, and then has continued to progress. He's finished in the top 8 in MVP voting in each of the last 9 seasons. And after this season, he'll be in the top 5, certainly, for the last 7 seasons. You're getting a guy who's still in his competitive prime, especially as those primes get elongated in the NBA and you see players playing past 36, 37, 38 years old. But if you're New Orleans Pelicans, you're not worried about those years. If you're chasing Giannis, you want those next 3 years. And if you're Joe Dumars in particular, and you're looking at this from his perspective, you have a template type player in Zion Williamson, a player who drives to the basket, scores around around the paint, creates advantages by being that guy who can get to the paint at will, collapsing the defense. That's Giannis, but 6 inches shorter. So if you're Joe Dumars, you already know how some of these pieces on this roster could fit potentially with a guy like Giannis. So if you traded Zion straight up with a couple of pieces obviously thrown in to make the salaries work, but if you trade Zion and let's say Kelly Olynyk, who has an expiring contract, so that's appealing to the Bucks, along with the control of those first round picks. So you give Olynyk and Zion and these picks, throw in Jordan Hawkins or whatever to make this work. Let's say you go into next season with Giannis, Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, who'd be in the final year of his deal, an expiring contract. That's a very interesting trio, right? And then you add in an Yves Missi to play defense, and you'd probably have to address the center position because you want some spacing there as well. You'd be able to pursue a Miles Turner in that regard to fill in that center spot. So what you're needing then is a point guard. But your primary ball handler, as he's been for a lot of his career, is Giannis, much like you've done with Zion. You go with point Giannis, a taller, longer, more athletic, in some ways player, able to finish above the rim a lot more easily. Giannis doesn't have the greatest post game, but you're talking about a guy. Are you going to be beggars? Beggars can't be choosers when you're talking about 30 plus points and 10 plus rebounds, 6 assists per night while shooting 60% from the floor. You want to see that type of talent engaged in a place where his competitive juices would be revitalized. He's going to want to prove again that he's still one of the most dominant players in the league. And he's going to be facing his peers, the people that the MVPs that he's competing against. You're going to play Shea every so often. You're going to play Jokic every so often. So I think those things could be intriguing in a move west for Giannis. But again, for New Orleans, Trey Murphy, Chris Middleton, you look at those archetypes. Trey Murphy, I think, would be an upgrade over a prime Chris Middleton. You look at a CJ McCollum and you go back to what worked for Giannis before they brought in Drew Holiday. The deficiency there would be on the defensive end. And that's where I think you're worried is, can the Pelicans defend with that group? So you'd have to address your guard situation there. But that means more opportunities for guys like Antonio Reeves, who certainly could be a knockdown shooter opposite Giannis. You look at an opportunity for a guy like Keon Brooks to be that Najee Marshall type opposite Giannis and be a Swiss Army knife. But you're going to have to address the guard position, and that's where your draft pick comes into play. And I think so for the Pelicans, there are ways to make it really appealing to Giannis to come to New Orleans. But is the cost of doing business in that regard too high? Because you're going to be short-term limited in knowing that you've got to win very quickly. And are the Pelicans suited for that kind of pursuit? Because that's never been the way this organization has operated. I think the closest you could say that they came to that was when they made the move for DeMarcus Cousins. That was an all-in type of move. We're going to go for a big name, pair him with our big name, and you knew that for both things. DeMarcus was at the end of his contract at the time, and you had an opportunity to re-sign him. So you had to prove to him that New Orleans was going to be the place for him. You had Anthony Davis obviously coming towards the end of his contract, which the departure of DeMarcus Cousins and Rajon Rondo certainly sped up his exit from New Orleans following that playoff run. So, the cost of doing business in that regard is you've got to win immediately if you bring in Giannis Antetokounmpo. And that means that Gail Benson is going to have to spend money, go over that luxury tax, go over that apron in order to get the kind of talent you're going to need to contend immediately. Because certainly if you add in Giannis Antetokounmpo to your roster, you're going to win 40 plus games. Even if Giannis plays, he played 67 games, I believe, in the regular season this year. If he plays 67 games for the Pelicans, you're going 40-27 at the worst in those 67 games. I think you're winning 40 games with him on the court. The question is, can you put those pieces around him to really make the team win and win fast? Because you don't think you're going to get a shot at a second contract. If you can convince him to stay in the short term, even if he wins a championship, there still may be more lucrative or more destination type places. Because if he's got his second title, his position is already secure as one of the greatest players in NBA history, wherever you want to place him, top 20, top 25, whatever, top 15. I'm fine with that. That's an argument for another day. But if you've got him in the fold, you're going to win games, but his long-term future may not be with you. If you're also, from the Pelicans' perspective, you look at it from Zion Williamson's perspective, and you've been put in this trade market for the last couple of weeks as the season wore down, and your name's been speculated basically since you came to New Orleans. I think that there's some acknowledgement on Joe Dumars' part that he's got to fix that relationship with Zion Williamson. And Scoop B referenced that in his article, saying that Joe still intends to meet with Zion again and kind of gauge where he is. I don't think Zion Williamson is a lost cause. And if you follow me and you read what I write and you listen to what I talk about, I would prefer that the Pelicans stay with Zion for one more year, because the operating cost is not problematic at this point. Trying with him again is not problematic, especially when you're when you know how difficult it is to attract a star. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The New Orleans Pelicans without Zion Williamson are a team in search of their next Zion Williamson. They're looking for a star. And those don't just fall out of trees. And you've seen it in New Orleans, how difficult it is to both have one and cultivate one. So you need the proper infrastructure to do that. And I think that can still be done with Zion Williamson. You know that the complementary pieces are here, but you've got to make the proper moves. And the Pelicans have a time to do that. No factor is going to be more important for the Pelicans in making that decision than the NBA draft lottery. When we look at that hurdle, and May 12th, we'll be right here live on Boot Krewe Media discussing the lottery as it happens. The top two picks are a certainty. We know it's going to be Cooper Flagg. We know it's going to be Dylan Harper, unless something dramatically changes. But if the Pelicans are 3, they're 4, or they're lower, then there are other options on the table. And those options could impact whether or not you're in the market for a big name or not. That draft spot is going to impact whether you're trading for a Giannis or not. Because certainly, if you get the number 1 pick, I think you're a lot less likely to trade that player because, or to not build around that player. If you're getting Cooper Flagg, you've got to put a structure in place that benefits Cooper Flagg. And certainly I think he's a great connector player and could play well with Giannis. But I think that you kind of worry if the focus shifts away from him, does he still, are the Pelicans making another mistake? Are we going back to the same place we've been before with this franchise? One player I want to look at who could be a potential option for the Pelicans is Baylor freshman VJ Edgecombe. If you're not familiar with Edgecombe, he's a 6'5" combo guard out of Baylor. He came from the Bahamas. Very athletic player. That's what his game is built on. Explosive dunks, a very quick first step, a high motor individually, though I think at times when you watch him play, you can see him drift. But I don't know if that's youth or a lack of engagement, the way that the defensive structure was set at times. He's been often compared overall to a guy like Victor Oladipo, though I would say that the difference between Oladipo was when Oladipo came in, there was already talk that he could play the point guard position. He was considered an elite defender out of the gate at Indiana and was as athletic as Edgecombe, but more physically developed. When you look at VJ Edgecombe at 6'5", that's what he's listed at, maybe 180. He's very light, not particularly strong anywhere in it. No upper body, his calves are not particularly, big. He doesn't look the part of an explosive athlete. He's explosive, but he doesn't look the part of somebody developed enough at this stage. So I think that his physical strength is going to be an issue for him. But what are his other strengths? Certainly his athleticism is where you start. That's off the charts. He's going to jump high. He's going to run fast. He's going to be a problem athletically. He's an elite leaper. You can throw him lobs in transition. He can finish at the rim with either hand, and he can take contact. Defensively, at times he can be a disruptor, playing passing lanes. He has very quick hands. He's agile, good anticipation. You got a number of steals. He's a guard who can block shots, and the Pelicans have had success with that kind of player. I mean, Drew Holiday, traditionally one of the leaders amongst guards in block shots. Defensively, he's more like a Gary Payton II or someone the Pelicans are familiar with, Bruce Brown. Though both of those guys are far more capable of handling physical matchups in the post. You've seen Gary Payton II play power forward. Memorably, David Griffin, when talking about Bruce Brown, and Willie Green said the same thing, was that he could guard positions 1 through 5. Now, that didn't make sense this season, but what it does show is that there's the strength, especially that lower body strength, to be able to hold your position in the low post. That's not something that VJ Edgecombe has. Offensively, he's a decent shooter. Shot about 34% from three-point range, 78% from the free throw line. That's a decent foundation for shooting. You can improve that. But a decent mid-range game, 39% of his long twos. The question marks offensively for him, not a great ball handler. Very much relies on that first step and his ability to get past people and his speed to get to the rim. Not a lot of change of direction, not a lot of great combination dribble moves. He's a functional ball handler, but limited. And I think that can make him easier to defend. He has to rely on that ability to separate. And if you can't get any kind of get the defense to go in one direction or the other with your ball handling ability, and they're right in front of you, this is the NBA. The defense is going to be much better than what you saw in college. You're not going up against somebody who's going to be going to grad school. You're going to be against somebody who's paid and putting meat on their table by playing professional basketball. Very different situation. Additionally, while he is a good finisher and can finish through contact at times, that 180 makes him pretty slight. When you're that height, that 180, that's point guard weight. That's 6'1", 6'2". You want that's point guard weight. And at 6'5", he's got a lot to do there in order to be somebody on a night-to-night basis that you feel can take the punishment that comes from playing the guard position and driving to the basket in the NBA. I mean, one of the criticisms that you have of Jordan Hawkins and his development has been his inability to handle the physicality. He still hasn't developed an NBA body 2 years in. And if you're VJ Edgecombe, you want to see, how does he fill out? Is he much more aligned physically with somebody, let's say like a baseball analogy, and his fellow countryman would be Jazz Chisholm Jr. And Jazz is this very wiry, athletic, and strong guy, but it's very much based on the quick twitch of those muscles rather than the definition and the bulk. So I'm not sure if VJ Edgecombe is going to grow rapidly. You can't project how somebody's going to be when they're 21, but I think, I don't know if he's going to grow rapidly into an NBA offensive and defensive finisher. He can get better with all those things. But is he too reliant on his athleticism, and does he have the kind of basketball instincts that this team needs to really improve? I don't think so. Not in the immediate future. I think he can help a team. But when you look at what the exact needs of the Pelicans are, and I think those main needs are ball handling and creation on the perimeter, shooting as always, and the ability to protect the paint and defend the rim. He doesn't help you in any of those ways. He's not a great playmaker. He's not going to defend the post, and he's not going to be a knockdown shooter. So you're betting on a player whose potential is high, but his skill set doesn't necessarily match what the New Orleans Pelicans are trying to do. So if I was wrapping up VJ Edgecombe, I would say high upside, elite athleticism, plenty of potential. But for the New Orleans Pelicans, if you're in a position where that's the best player on the board, then I think you might want to trade that pick and let somebody else take VJ Edgecombe and get better value later in the draft. Even a couple steps back, if you're taking a Knippel from Duke, if you're taking, there are other players that I think at 6, 7, 8 would be a better value than taking a VJ Edgecombe at 3 or 4 for the New Orleans Pelicans and what they want to do as a franchise. That's definitely something that we should keep an eye on, and we will keep an eye on for you as we get closer and closer to the draft and see what the Pelicans are thinking and what they may do with that pick that they get in the lottery. Again, don't forget to tune in next Monday as we go through the draft lottery live here on Boot Krewe Media. All right, the last bit of shakeup that could happen for the New Orleans Pelicans is James Borrego. Per Mark Stein and Jake Fisher of the Stein line, among the names surfacing for the job with the Phoenix Suns as their next head coach is New Orleans Pelicans assistant James Borrego. Borrego, of course, was the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets from 2018 to 22, interim head coach of the Orlando Magic in 2015. He's been with the Pelicans for the last 2 seasons, and his reputation has been based on his offensive creativity. You haven't seen a lot of that over the last 2 seasons with the New Orleans Pelicans. And I think that most fans wonder how much of that is limited by Willie Green and his reluctance to embrace the pace and shooting that Borrego's system requires. Because everywhere he's been, he's implemented it. When he was in Charlotte, and people will look at his overall record, look, Charlotte is a team that's, like the Pelicans, considered one of those misguided franchises that just can't get it right. So there's a lot of synergy, unfortunately, between these franchises that kind of, I guess, Pelicans obviously at one time were the Charlotte Hornets before they came here. And then, these ties to these organizations, whether it's Detroit or Charlotte, that's psychologically something that could be explored. But when you look at what Borrego did in Charlotte, there was improvement from year to year. As the team got better, he got better. But what was consistent was the offensive prowess of that Charlotte Hornets team. And when he got to Orlando, they were very proficient offensively. Does that mean he's going to be a great head coach again? I don't know. I think he has the potential. I think that other teams certainly see it. He was a candidate last season for both the Pistons and Cavaliers vacancies. And though certainly you can't argue with the results that either one of those franchises have had, him not getting those jobs isn't indicative that he can't do the job. It doesn't mean much, but he is 2-0 as the interim head coach of the Pelicans on nights that Willie Green sat out, both of those due to personal reasons. But Borrego did go 2-0 in those situations. I think that there's a divide in the locker room philosophically, and I think there's a divide in the locker room by approach. James Borrego and Willie Green, if you're around them, they're very different people. Not incompatible, but very different in how they approach the way that they want to run their basketball teams and just the way they approach life. There's a different rhythm to the two of them. And I think there's something about Borrego that resonates with a broader group of people. I think Willie Green is a man of integrity. That's the good person thing. You all know that. And I think that it doesn't serve us anymore to talk about how good of a person Willie Green is. And Justin has said it plenty of times, doesn't care for any more good people. I think most of the guys have said they don't care to talk about how good the people are. Not in that you want criminals on your team, but that's not why you root for your team. You don't root for your team to gather the men of the year. What you want them to do is gather a winning team. And I think that there's something that Borrego brings to the table in his energy that this team is missing. I think that when your best player is suited to playing in the open court and you want the best options for him, the times that we've seen Zion Williamson at his best, whether it was under Stan Van Gundy offensively or at his best individually in these last couple of years with Willie Green, it's because Zion has been able to create, get downhill, and kick it out to others. Pelicans have not always made the shots that when he's kicked it out. They've not always been the right teammates out there around him. But you see that pace engages Zion. He's much more engaged on the defensive end when the team is playing up-tempo. And I think the Pelicans in general, just winning in this league, there are certain hallmarks that you've just got to hit. You have to be over. You don't have to get to 40 3-pointers a night. And I know that was their goal. And you watch the Celtics and they can shoot 50 3-pointers in a night. You don't have to get even that high. But it has to be something that's part of the diet. And whenever the Pelicans are trying to shoot threes, it's always like they're trying to force feed the three. And that can't be the way that the team works anymore with Zion Williamson. If you're going to have, even with Giannis, if you brought in Giannis, the offense that Willie Green runs is not conducive to that. So what does it mean if James Borrego leaves the staff? What is what is the impact there? Well, certainly if Willie Green is still the coach, and that means he's got to find someone else to handle the offense. And the question would be, do you trust him to find that person? Or is that a decision that Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver are going to make, who his top assistant would be? And if that's the case, if Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver are making the decision on who his next offensive assistant should be, then does Willie Green need to be around for another season? And I think ultimately this Borrego thing is just highlighting the fact that the Pelicans need to make a decision about their head coach. And while Joe Dumars has not publicly come out and said whether he's going to keep Willie Green or he's going to let him go, and there's time to make that decision, certainly, the longer it goes on, I think that it makes everything more difficult. It makes it more difficult to convince the players who are returning that things are going to be different, because I think the players understand, and you could hear from their comments, that the things that were wrong were deeper than injuries. The things that have been wrong with the Pelicans over the last 4 seasons are deeper than injuries. There are fundamental flaws to the roster construction that now have to be addressed by Joe Dumars, but there are also fundamental flaws in their game plan, in their strategy, and how they utilize talent. So, if you know that your head coach has these problems and you're about to lose one of the few experienced offensive minds that you have on your coaching staff, how can you feel confident that things are really going to improve this season with the same coach in place? And by and large, I think you'll be seeing a lot of the same faces on the roster. There will be moves, but because of the contract situations, because of the injury to DeJounte Murray, some of these things are going to make it really hard for the Pelicans to make a lot of moves. They may make one big one, they make a couple of small ones, but overhauling this roster in 1 year is going to be kind of hard. The difference between being 8th and 6th, being in the play-in or out, we saw how quickly it changed at the end of the season. We've seen it more than once. We can go back to that 2018 season when the Pelicans made the playoffs and won their first-round series. They were the 6th seed that year, and I think the separation from 3rd to 8th was a game and a half. So this has been the West for years now. If you want to pick up those extra wins on the nights when you're not supposed to win games, you need a competent head coach that your team believes in. Now, I don't think the Pelicans believe in Willie Green, the players. I think there are people in the front office who don't believe in Willie Green. And I don't think the league believes in Willie Green as a head coach. His name was floated a bit by the Suns, and I think that was internal familiarity. But, or if you just think you're going to be in a bad spot for the next couple of years and you want an inexpensive coach that's not going to be a problem, then you stick with Willie Green. Okay. But if you want to win games, if you want to be a competitor in the Western Conference, if you want to compete for a championship, that's not your coach. And if he's not your coach next year, and if he's not your coach 4 years from now, if you're not planning to take Willie Green to the grave with you, then it's time to let him go and really see what this franchise is capable of with someone else in charge. All right, folks, that's going to be my debut episode. I really appreciate you listening, watching, and taking the time to check it out. Make sure you make sure you subscribe to Boot Krewe Media, and we'll be here every day on weekdays. I'll be doing other things as well on social media to give you that Pelicans news and content that you're looking for. So thank you again. Thank you to Justin Napoli for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to Lala for helping me set up today and get me going. And thank you to all the fellas and just welcome me and embracing me to be a part of the team. So until the next time, I am David Grubb. You can follow me on social media at DM Grubb, on Twitter, Instagram. You can find me on Blue Sky as well. And you can find me on TikTok. So I'm on all those places. You can find me and follow me there. Until the next time, thank you so much. Let's go Pels.